meeting so as to constitute a quorum of the Board of Education. Any such board member attendance will be for information gathering only and will not result in any direct decision-making by the Board of Education at the committee meeting. We don't have any extras here tonight as it is. And I need to do the safety message first. This will be really quick. I just have a few things. I've talked about pedestrian safety. I'm steering slightly off, just talking about hiking for anyone who wants to get out into nature and hike over the summer or any time. I myself am a hiker, so I think this is always great information to share. Here are some things to keep in mind if you are going to be out hiking. Eat snacks and drink water. Hiking can drain your energy quickly. Dehydration and heat exhaustion may sneak up on you on the trails. Be sure to drink as you are thirsty. Snack on nutritional foods such as trail mix, nuts, granola bars to keep your energy high. I will also say I like to also leave extra water in my car because I feel like a lot of times we'll drink the water on the trail and then we'll get back to the car and people will be thirsty, and so having extra water there for when you're done hiking is helpful as well. Take your time and watch your stuff. Be careful and watch where you are walking, especially on slippery areas or near cliffs. I always tell my kids this. Best way to ruin a hiking trip is to trip and sprain your ankle. Step away from rapid waters and slippery slopes. Consult local tide tables and pay attention to tidal behavior. It's not really appropriate around here, but it could be in other places if you are hiking elsewhere in the country. Spray for mosquitoes and check for ticks. I just saw a really cool thing on social media that somebody had this little thing that went on their keychain, and it's like a tick remover that you can get, and it really helps if you see a tick that's embedded. It will help get the tick out immediately, so that's something to keep in mind. Check your clothing and your body for ticks during and after your hike. Spring is one of the worst time for ticks, by the way. We don't hike as much in the spring because of that. And then be aware of wildlife. You might see some wildlife while you are out exploring. Check the different parks or areas where you are to educate yourself on responsibly watching wildlife, and store your food properly, and do not wear strong scents. I think many of us have seen that there's been a black bear roaming around not far from here, so I think about that every time I see one of those news reports. Oh gosh, what would we do if we saw that bear while we were hiking? So those are my tips for you. Safety message brought to you on this June 5th day. Moving forward, I need a motion to adopt the June 5th agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. Okay, thank you. We are now moving on to 2023-2024 Employee Health Insurance Open Enrollment Update.
Yes,
Ms.
good
Johnson,
evening.
thank you.
Or afternoon, I guess. It's not quite evening yet. So we are in the ending stages of our open enrollment. As you know, that the School District of Janesville enters into open enrollment for health benefits and voluntary annually during the month of May, for an effective start date of July 1st. So we've been working closely with the employees over the course of the last 2 weeks to get everybody enrolled. You may recall, I'll go through this, the 2023 renewal recap and current enrollment is what we'll be looking at. So we came back with all of our renewals again, just as a brief overview of what we've been through. Mercy came back at their 9%, Dean came back at 17.9%. MetLife offered a 0% increase for 2023 and a rate cap going forward. Everybody else stayed status quo with voluntary and others. So that took us into some decision making, one of which took place at the board meeting on April 29th. The deductible remaining at $1,500 for a single and $3,000 for a family, with a maximum out of pocket to increase to a $3,000 for a single and a $6,000 for a family, with a 20% coinsurance that the employee is responsible for once they have met their initial deductible. Once the out-of-pocket is met, everything then, some restrictions may apply, will be 100% covered, and the district continues to contribute $600 for a single plan and $1,200 for all other plans to the HSA. So that was what was approved to the board and shared out with the employees, and those were their options going forward. So what are we looking at for current enrollment? This is kind of a side by side of where we are for the 22-23 year versus 23-24. I have to make sure that we understand the asterisk, which means that it is subject to change. It is very early for us to be giving preliminary numbers out, but just in the event that you were wondering what the decisions were coming down. Dean, this last year, we had 463 employees enrolled in that plan. We currently have 346 enrolled in that plan. Mercy had 548 last year, and we are going forward 656 for next year. Total enrollment in the school district of Janesville health plans this last year was 111. Going into 23-24, we have 1,002. The Family Advantage Health Plan last year topped out at 40 employees enrolled in. This year, at this time, there are 82 signed up for that. So total eligibility for both, because it's kind of running concurrent, right? We're closing out the majority of the employees who are on the plan are on teacher contracts, which go through August 31st, so it would be the same, is 1,301 employees eligible. Okay. Final thoughts on this enrollment and how we went through the process. Changes happen on a regular basis. They could be due to qualifying events, aging out off the plan at age 26. Now, remember, we do have many employees who are coming to us straight from college, so they stay on, or employees who have children who are staying on our plan at age 26, they have to hop off of our plan. New hires coming onto our plan. There's a variety, of reasons. We also will say that we are, as a benefits team, going through a case-by-case audit of the enrollment, not only within the plans, but also with some people, because in that audit, we did recognize that some common errors would be multiple enrollments, dual enrollments, inaccurate dependent information, which would all result in numbers being skewed from the previous map. So while our system is automated through Employee Navigator and our employees are well versed in the system, it's a really busy time in the schools right now to be asking employees to go in and take the time and concentrate and get the form filled out. So recognizing that, we're really careful to provide service to our employees and run an employee audit based on their elections, just because we want to make sure that they get what they want. In that process, we did find already that there are some employees who dual enrolled Family Advantage Health Plan and Dean, or Family Advantage Health Plan and Mercy. So our final numbers we will bring forward to you once we get through the hiring season and the start of the school year, because all of our new hires, again, begin their employee benefits September 1st. So typically what we've done in the past is come to the PPC, or the benefits committee, in early October with some numbers and idea of what our enrollment actually looks like. And then we'll come back to you again in January when we start the renewal process to give you yet again another opportunity, because between October and January is typically when other businesses go through open enrollment. And so if an employee is looking at the Family Advantage Health Plan and are not able to get onto their spousal plan at this time, they will do it during that time. So we'll have yet again another switch of people. Make sense? Any questions that you have for me regarding this open enrollment update? Lisa?
Not necessarily a question, but a comment. When you go back to the current enrollment, I know the numbers might be skewed because of the comment that you made about dual enrollment, some people being in the Family Advantage Plan and also enrolling in Mercy, or vice versa with Dean.
Mm-hmm.
But I see the Family Advantage Plan going from 40 to 82.
Mm-hmm.
That's a 100% increase. I know there might be in the 70s if you have to take some.
Yeah, we're
adults out.
definitely.
But this is the trend you were looking for,
That's
correct?
exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, this is above what we thought was going to happen. I mean, what we actually said. So that's when we come back and take a look at these numbers in October, I think it's going to be interesting to see how it has impacted our plan.
And also financially?
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Yes.
Okay.
Financially has impacted our plan.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
Indeed. I also will share with you that I am meeting with the Mercy team in the coming weeks for our care advisor to put that in place, to look at some set hours through Mercy for clinic hours and future conversations about possible rate caps based on enrollment, which they also had talked to us about during the negotiation process. So I'll be able to bring back an update on that as well.
I have a comment too.
Sure.
I just want to tell you how much I appreciate hearing things like, the audit that you're doing as like a sensitive awareness to what's going on in employees' lives, and that they might not make the right choice or might, have an accident or sign dual enrollment. I just think that's really important, and I really appreciate your sensitivity to the complex lives that employees lead. I always see that awareness, and I really appreciate how you are always looking for how can we better meet their needs. We have to change things, we're always changing, but how can we meet their needs during this process? So thank you for continually being tuned in to that, because it's really important, and I value that so much. Thanks.
Thank you for recognizing that. Appreciate that. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to 1.5, presentation and consider moving to full board hourly increase for summer school and summer curriculum work wages. Dan McCray.
Thanks. I think I just do the short straw. That's why I'm at the podium. But included in your packet certainly was a memo for your review prior to tonight's or this afternoon's meeting, really with the focus of taking a look at adjusting some rates, which we've been locked in for quite some time. I think it's important to perhaps take a step back and understand that we're always looking forward. So these are not things that all of a sudden we have an aha moment. Probably since my first year here in the district, listening to Allison and Kim and Julie DeCook, and others when they're talking about curriculum writing and how we're falling behind, or even when we're talking and looking at about substitute pay and how we're, not substitute pay, try to get my act together here. Summer school pay, lots of pay factors rolling around in my head at the moment. So those are things that we see on the landscape, but unfortunately the landscape at a particular moment in time may not allow us to bring a recommendation forth to the committee and to the board for its consideration. Right, so we may know about something, but is there an opportunity to perhaps make a change? So I think this is something that's been ongoing. I think since the work that the directors team and principals have done relative to staffing, that's afforded us the opportunity to really take a look at implementing some change. And so before you, as outlined again in the memo, you have three considerations. One is taking a look at summer school pay, the other IEP pay, and then the other really focused on curriculum writing. So I talked a little bit about curriculum writing. I know we have three educators on the committee who perhaps know all about that, but if there was a question, I prepped Allison to perhaps address that. But I will ask the committee, and should this move forward to the full board, to also consider about the significant adoptions and investments over the last 2 years the district has been moving forward with. And so curriculum is not necessarily a plug and play, again, to the three educators on the panel, the committee. But there's really a lot of work, not only in terms of rollout, but actually after a year of implementation, revisiting that work and seeing what recommendations can be brought forward to change. That's not done during a typical school day or a school year calendar, right? And that was really the focus, curriculum work, summer school pay. And again, Kim can speak to it if need be in terms of the IEP evaluator. Again, this is not a compensation for every member of the IEP team, but really the facilitator, the coordinator of that work. Oftentimes it's the school psychologist who will lead that team effort for the IEP. Again, if you have technical questions, I'll defer to Kim and or Allison. But that's really the memo in brief. You did that just for me, right? Because I got a little tongue-tied in my presentation, so thank you very much for illustrating that empathy.
Just out of curiosity, for the recommendation, how did you come about with those dollar amounts? Did you take a median? Did you take the area around us? Because during your analysis portion, you listed a variety of different school districts. So how did you arrive at those numbers?
Yeah, fair question. Those were the districts that responded to the survey or just through our research, right? So, quite frankly, the State Journal did an extensive article when Madison upped their pay to well over 40, so they looked at comparative districts. We captured those in addition to, we'll say, the area districts. So I think for us too, that's again focusing on summer school. I think for us, just really trying to align. We have a number of different pay values throughout the district, not only on the, we just have a number of different factors throughout the district. So this was something that we just thought, let's go ahead and align them. The IEP, right, so we have, you know, I'm not saying it's going to help Kim in her recruiting for very specialized positions, right, but we have a very difficult time, and again, if Kim wants to chime in, she certainly can, in terms of just really making those positions attractive, not only for our existing staff, but for staff who are considering coming to the district for hard-to-fill positions. Mm-hmm.
I guess I would just add to that, not just attracting people, but the work is hard and it has to be done. And so they should be compensated well for it. That's my thought on it. It's like $28 an hour, really. You know, it's not a full-time thing, right? It's a part-time job during the summer or whatever, and the work, again, the work, that curriculum work that you mentioned, the IEP work that you mentioned, and of course the summer school stuff, it has to be done. It should be compensated. It's hard work.
If we look at the hourly rate, if we were to take a look at our initial educator, which is probably a term we don't use anymore, but essentially the $45,000 for a first-year educator, right? It's $45,000 and some change, right? That amounts to just over $29 per hour, right? So when Kim or Allison, right, or Julie DeCook is looking at curriculum writing or summer school pay, right, it's really at our lowest entry level. So even when Paul Stengel is looking to have perhaps individuals who are extremely experienced in a particular curriculum area and attracting them back to teach during the summer school, whether it's for remedial or enrichment, right, the 2370 is just is low.
I so appreciate having the list of all of these school districts because I think it's really important for us to see we were really low. And I heard it from people. I would hear that our rates were not great. But when you see it like this, especially looking at Madison, wow. I am very grateful. These are hardworking individuals, and we want people to be motivated to come to Janesville and stay in Janesville and be excited about summer school. We all know that there are, there's learning loss that happens over the summer, and we have big goals in our district. So summer school, I think, is going to continue to be a poignant aspect of continuing to move that needle for a lot of our students. And this is, I believe, very essential. So thanks for putting this all together, for everyone speaking up and saying that, we just need to keep moving up because this is a great place to be, and we want everyone to feel that.
Yeah, data, as everyone knows, right? So I can do nothing as well as my peers but drown you all in data, right? So sometimes what I try to do from a fiscal standpoint is, all right, what essentially is within the Gazette reading area, right? So that's going to be the greater Rock County, right? Because they're going to be reporting on mill rates or they're going to be reporting on summer school pay or whatever data point, right? The next, if you will, is what's in our athletic conference. So I at times am shy to include Madison within data comparables simply because it's Dane County and it's Madison. The reality is you see, Verona and Sun Prairie and Middleton Cross Plains, which are in our athletic conference, which is another data point we like to take a look at. The third data point, which for summer school isn't necessarily we're not gonna get anyone from, Wausau, which would be comparable, or Eau Claire, or La Crosse, or Sheboygan, or West Allis, West Milwaukee. That is a third data ring we occasionally take a look at. But going really quick back to the point is our teachers just don't reside in Janesville, right? So do they want to come to Janesville, right, to teach during the summer school, or will they stay in Evansville or Stoughton or Whitewater, right, to teach in their home community? This makes it a little bit more of a consideration for them.
it probably says in here, and maybe I missed it, but when, I know that this is going to the full board, but when would this go into effect should this pass?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Within the memo, right, we outlined we wanted to capture the start of our summer school season to where certainly things begin as well as curriculum writing, right? Because it ends next week, right? But then we start right away. You know, Allison has a very aggressive agenda for those who are doing so this summer, right? So it's a way to recognize it so we don't have a duel. So essentially, if the board approves it, right, we would then just retro. We typically don't start to get timesheets, right, until late in June, right? And then in July 10th, right? And then probably the July 25th payroll. So we're capturing it, but it will capture dollars. So it's a great point within the current fiscal year.
Right.
Our position puts us in stuff though, puts us in such a position at the end of this fiscal year to where it's not going to be a financial burden to finish out this year with the increased rates.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, this gets moved to the full board. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to spend some time with Tina at the end of this, right? Because she's such a songbird when she gets up here, right? And I am not, so.
Okay, thank you. 1.6, presentation on updated hiring process for certified staff. Mr. Holzman, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. In your board package, you have I think, 3-page overview that I'm sharing with you. It's basically the guide that we created for a one-stop shop for our building administrators and those administrators who are hiring certified staff. So this purpose of this is to kind of coordinate all of our certified staff hiring. Our goals as we work through the process of hiring is we want all of our potential employees to feel good about the process and feel like they've had a best opportunity to be heard and then quickly responded to if they're candidates, or if they're not candidates, quickly responded to them. So we also wanted to make sure that we had a unified system within the district and making sure that we're providing some supports from the district office and our HR pieces, and also communicating within our district about high quality candidates, because many of our buildings are hiring similar candidates. So we wanted to make sure that we had a practice that would allow candidates who might not be selected initially to be considered highly for other positions in that system. So what this guide does, and I'll walk you through it pretty quickly, is it just identifies where we put that. Good, bad, or indifferent, we can, is the model that all Wisconsin educators and school districts use. And so we use We Can to post all of our certified staffing positions. You can get there on our website. So if you go to the School District of Janesville website and employment, you can get to certified employment. You can get to We Can as well. That's where those positions are posted. The job descriptions under B talks a little bit about the specifics, but yeah, again, we're talking about certified staff. So the most part, they each have a job description aligned, and then they'll talk specifically about that. The advertising of the positions you can see is C, and what we will do internally, it's the website and We Can. Occasionally, we'll push out other things for certified staff, which might be Indeed or other application processes of which we pay for, but in general, that's the place. We've made a slight change and probably an increase in our interest in screening applicants. So if we go on to the web page that the district owns portion for we can see all of our certified employees. And so the principals will go in there and see the individuals who have applied. And we really encourage them to do a first brush look. And so we've asked them to do screening applicants. And so what they do, we give them, if you see there's a piece on there that says look fors when screening applicants. So we didn't make this live because we didn't want to have all the details there, but if you want some more, I can help you with that. So the principals can click on that, and then they can go through a process of what they should be looking for when they're screening. And a screener is often virtual. It might be a 15 or 20 minute conversation to find out if I want to move you forward to an application. The reason why we're encouraging that is, number one, it allows you to select top candidates, and two, it's easier to get yourself as a building administrator and one other person in the table as opposed to getting your team together. And that team part, you don't have second or third chances very often to get all those people together. So we want to make sure that that's meaningful and purposeful, and they have that. So what we tried to do then is give them tips, and so you see under each one there's some reminder tips that they can have, and it'll say, depending on a pool of candidates, you want to look out and reach out to candidates and certified. So what we talk about is underneath the screening applicants. If I'm a building principal and I would reach out to screen applicants, there's a place in there where I would check on we can, and then we would reach out to those individuals. Generally, their support staff and their secretaries would set up those candidates. They would then decide from there which candidates they want to interview. And at that time, then we're going into the interview process. So they've already done the screener interview. We then talk a little bit, you can see on there, there's a best practice, and then we talk about the panel interview practice. And from there, there's a couple of things that we added. Not that we haven't done in the past, but we wanted to make sure that they were reminded. One was we wanted them to sign a confidentially and non-discrimination agreement. And the reason being is we need all of those panel interview folks, which likely are our teachers, our other certified staff in that area, to remind them that this is a confidential interview and that their peers are going to say, who did you interview? Knowing that only one person's going to get the job, it's not everybody else's business to know who didn't get the job, right? And so we want them to do that because, again, if you're a candidate who is applying, maybe I'm coming from one of those area districts we just talked about in summer school pay, I probably don't want everybody else to know that I'm coming in. So we want to do that confidentially and privately. In addition to that, we might have had somebody who was a perfect match for us, but there's another opening in a similar building of which we really want to be interested in you. And if a lot of people know your business, I might not have a good feeling about the interview process that I had in Janesville, and I'm going to find somewhere else. I'm like, I'm done. I'm not doing that. So we do that just to remind folks that even though you're here and you get to see everybody, your job is not, it's advisory, and don't say anything, right? So we kind of go through that process. We then have the interview question document. So we give them a document and say, here are the questions you get to choose from. And there's focus questions in there under the pedagogic skills. We have some questions under there we put in there this year specifically to talk about equity and engagement. We have questions that might be very specific to your building. And we go through that, and they have to pick a couple of questions under each one. When you put through that panel, they might have as many as 15 questions. They go around and talk about who's going to pick 1, 2, 3, et cetera, et cetera. And so, in addition to that, if you just keep going down, because this is in a Google Doc, it kind of goes down. So on page 3 on the top of the far left, you'll see interview rating rubric and performance rating tasks. So one of the things that is challenging about interviewing is that the principals and probably our coordinators and directors, they interview all the time. I mean, they've probably interviewed 10 or 15 people a year. Whereas if I'm a staff member, I might interview, be on one committee every 3 years. So I don't have as much expertise about what's supposed to happen. And so sometimes I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? They sound good, they look good, I think I want them on my team. Well, that's probably not a selection process. We want them to use a rating rubric that helps them understand, well, what are the strengths that we're looking for, and did they answer the questions? And so we go through that performance task, rating rubric. The performance task might be, we ask you to do something. And again, it depends on the time and when we have it. If I'm hiring somebody, we might have them teach in front of kids. We might have them do an activity. We might have them write a welcome a letter to the parents prior to the interview. There's just a performance task. At times we do that because we want to get a better feel for who they are and what their skills are. They kind of go through to the end, and then we talk a little bit about just individually knowing that we have some bias within our recruiting, and then we also want to let everybody know what you may or may not ask during the interview. So we have any additional questions. Someone says, well, how do you, I don't know, something about family, relationship, all those things that you cannot ask, so we kind of go through that. if you circle back then to that references and recommendations, one of the things that the Janesville does have is a really nice process that we use for getting some reference checks. And so we talked to the building principals about the process, and the process this year is going to be, we're not going to do any reference checks with our system until we've identified candidates who we're going to interview. And then even then, we don't have to finalize until, if the principal wants to wait until we have the final candidate. And the background on that is that in the past we had been doing, there's a digital process that's very good and gives us good feedback. But you have to likely let your supervisor know that they're going to get a communication and an email. And if in fact you do and you don't get an interview, it doesn't feel good. So we wanted to make sure that I know that at least I'm getting an interview before I tell my supervisor that I'm interviewing, as opposed to technically I've applied. And so we're just trying to make it a little bit more user friendly. Some principals really like the process, and so they use that as one of the tools for determining if they're moving their candidate to the final or not. And some hold off until the end, and we have a top candidate. We're going to do the reference check on that top candidate, and if it comes back solid and sound, then I'm going to move it forward. If not, we'll talk about what Plan B might be. So again, you kind of go through that hiring, and you can see if you have interviewed candidates who are valuable candidates as the bottom. We want them to be able to seek others. So we talk a little bit about what that process is and how we want to go about doing that. So once we go from that process, we then move over from that recommendation. The building principal is going to put together the packet and let HR know, and then they are going to call the candidate and say, congratulations, we're so excited you're coming to the school district of Janesville. You are our top choice. Rah, rah, shish, kumbah. Like, stay with us, you're awesome. And then they say, our HR team is going to call you in the next 24 to 48 hours, and they're going to talk to you specifically about our benefits and our pay. It's a bit of a change that we made specifically to take the building principal out of the negotiating pay piece, because they really got a number, and then if that didn't work out, they had to go back to get permission to go higher or a different number. And so we left that number within HR for a couple of reasons. Scott and I and Brianna have had conversations about what our maximum that we can offer, and sometimes that's based on where our current employees are. And so we want to be cognizant of that, because now people are considering leaving with 28 years experience. We had somebody this year, I think, from Beloit who came to us with 28 years experience. And so we have to be cognizant about, we want this person great value, but we also have to understand, well, where does that fit within what we're currently paying everybody else, right? So we try to create a bachelor's and a master's maximum. What that does is it gives us consistency, so that only 2 people are making offers, so that makes sense. And then we know where they are, and they're really going to be consistent. And we do have a high quality salary and benefits schedule. We're nothing that we should ever be embarrassed about. I mean, we're always looking for ways to continue to compensate our folks. However, we have to be consistent. So that, I think, has helped a bunch. So then HR works with that. We've been really successful. I was meeting today with our HR department, and I think the number of weekend positions that were open was 22, and there was a few that were left. And we had some questions about just advertising. We looked at another area school districts that were similar to us, and I think they had 56, right? So I'm like, well, I'm feeling pretty good about 22, and now we know that that's going to continue. But the process for our building principals, and I think what is true to this, is that number one, it's uniform, and that we're always trying to do the same thing. Number two is we're cognizant about quality applicants, because we know that people who are interested, for example, maybe at a 3rd grade job at Madison Elementary School probably would be interested in a 2nd or 4th grade job at any of our other, and if they didn't get it, we want to reach out to them. So the building principals are responsible for calling individually and reaching out to the candidates who they didn't select, but were interviewed. The HR will take care of everybody else. And in this, it kind of has a, sample emails or communications for those candidates who aren't selected. And we've coached them, like, less is more, don't tell them why you didn't hire them, but, hey, we really appreciate you, you're a great fit, there's other spots, would you like me to move your name forward? And we want to try to continue to communicate that. So, again, there's a lot of work and there's a lot of people behind all of the processes here within how we're going about doing it. We implemented this in probably late April when we started hiring, and we've checked in with our principals in May in our principals meeting, and we've got good feedback. Like, yep, I feel good about this process. I think we're really solid, and we're working on that. So I'll pause there and see if there's questions or comments or anything.
Well, it's a short timeframe, but everybody's had any experience with principals recommending other positions?
Yeah, so the answer is yes. And in some cases, we've had principals review applications together because I have a third grade and you have a fourth grade, and who are you interviewing, who am I interviewing? So they're trying to communicate that together. So the answer is yes, we've had some success. And I think we've also seen, sometimes we have internal candidates who move from one building to another building, and they're going through the process now after the movement is they have to interview. And we're seeing people who are applying for 2 or 3 jobs in a district. And we've even had one who applied for one job and another job, and this principal said, do you want the job? And then this principal said, you want the job? And the person took this one because they called them first. So,
That's a good problem to
yeah, I
have.
mean, but for the employee, that's great. But for the like, oh, okay. And then they talked a little bit about, well, who did you else have, and who else did you have? Because we got the person we're looking for, but it wasn't in my role. So we're working on that. And the system, I think, this summer we're going to see even more because there'll be fewer candidates. But I have seen some positive things. I think Kennedy has, was it almost 20 candidates for one of their elementary positions, which is
That's
like 10
great.
more than we've seen before. And so as we see other openings, their top 4 might be someone that we can move in. And sometimes it's just the fit, right? Like, I've been teaching 4th grade, and we have a 1st grade opening, but you know what? We got a 4th grade over here. Would you be interested in that? So.
Outstanding, thank you.
So, I'm just curious as to how much of this process or in what way is, if it is, communicated to applicants? Because I know that, you send in your application, nobody delivers an application in person anymore. Nobody, it just seems to go into the void, and you hope something happens. And sometimes I think that process, people don't really understand. They think that because there's no feedback right away or necessarily enough feedback. So I was just curious.
Yeah, that's a good point. So if you're selected for a screener, they will share with you what the process is. Like, okay, we're going to do a screener, and then from the screener candidates, we're going to go to a formal interview, and then we'll make a recommendation. But as I think through that, I bet you we could create a brief bullet point that we put on our website that says, here's the process we use. Because there's, apply, screener, formal interview, principal recommendation, job offer, board approval. That's probably the process.
People would probably appreciate that.
Yeah, I think we could do that. Do you have something?
Yeah, I mean, we could easily put that, post that, just very kind of plain schedule online. Most of our principals, when they do call for screeners or whatever, do explain the process to each applicant that qualifies.
Just to piggyback off that, just that simple technique of showing people when they apply on our website what we do might actually garner you more applicants because you're forthright and transparent about how the process works. They might go to another school district webpage and just think it does go into the void. Well, look, at School District of Janesville actually told me all these 5 little bullet points on how the process works.
It's not a mystery then, right?
It's not a mystery,
Yeah.
because otherwise you do. You just think your application goes into the Ethernet.
I love that. That was such a great question, and I love that we're looking at constantly ways to improve and make it a better process for all. And I appreciate that we're looking at the applicants and what their experience, because we want their first experience with the school district of Janesville to be positive. And if that job didn't pan out, that they would be encouraged to try again. I also like from an administrative and screener standpoint that this is all laid out so well, because it's challenging. And, many of our principals, they're all experienced, but if you're newer stepping into those roles and you're having to, create the wheel for what you're gonna do, we just don't need to do that. And I think this really facilitates a cohesive process across our district, which I think the applicants would also feel. And it, like you're gonna go to one school and get a similar experience and it not seem very, chaotic. So thank you for investing the time into this. I know it's, one part, but you know what? Successfully employing quality people is so important, and this is, a great step in that process. Thank you.
And I just wanted to say that I didn't mean to suggest that this wasn't fabulous. This was fabulous, this process, and I like the way it's laid out, and I like the consistency, and it looks to me like a very efficient system. And I think that the more that we have systems in place, the better we are operationally, obviously. So thank you to your team for that. But I just want to make sure that's understood.
I just wanted to make one last comment about, I was gonna comment, but you already beat me to the punch about the consistency, because I think that speaks well for the school district. But I also appreciate what stood out in my mind when you went through and gave the overview of this document, the consideration that all of these applicants are humans, and they might all have existing jobs. So how you protected their privacy and their confidentiality during the interview process, I think speaks volumes for the school district of Janesville, that you incorporated that into this hiring guide for principals. So I just wanted to make that comment, because I really greatly appreciate that, and I think all human beings would appreciate that as they apply for various positions.
All right, well, okay, we don't have to vote on anything for that, so we can move on to 1.7, review Neola draft policies and consider moving to full board for adoption. And we have a whole list. I don't need to
Motion to
read
move
those,
on
right?
to the board for approval.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. Awesome, that moves to full board. Thank you so much. 1.8, announcements and updates. Ms. Jensen, do you have anything to okay. We're not meeting in July. We will be meeting because it's the day before the 4th of July, and it's right at the holiday, so it does not make sense. Okay. Don't come. We won't be here. We will be meeting in August. We do not have a plan session for that yet scheduled, do we? I might be out of town, so we might need to reevaluate. Okay. Okay, thank you. Because would that be on the 10th? If so, I'll be out of town. Okay, so there'll be a couple people who will not be available. Thank you, we'll figure that out. And if there, of course, there's ever any updates or things that you want to see, please reach out. We will get that talked about. We have some great things coming up. We really planned going forward, so thanks to the team. Ms. Jensen?
August 15th is the date for the new employee tours.
Thank you.
So looking for board members to participate in that and ride buses.
If I'm free, I will volunteer. I'll check my calendar. That'd be great. I missed it last week, or last week.
I'd be happy to. And it was really fun this year, actually, when I was out doing things in the district to see people, employees. There was one actually that presented to us from, I believe it was Rock River Charter, and I recognized, like, oh wait, he was in my group. So I felt that was a really awesome experience. I was glad to be able to participate in that. Thanks for giving us that date in advance. Okay. All right, everyone. If there isn't anything else to add, we will adjourn our meeting. Thank you.